Hello. I realized that yesterday's lesson was maybe a little much to pack into one video, so I'm going to go over mapping two things kind of a little bit more in depth. I'm going to look at the same exact problem, the same exact triangle XYZ, with the same points. In the first one, I'm going to translate it to the right and then reflect it over the y-axis. I'm going to do the same things in the second one, only I'm going to do them in the opposite order. So if we just think about how that looks first, this triangle is going to move 2 to the right and then flip over the y-axis. Whereas this triangle is going to flip over the y-axis and then move 2 to the right. So they'll definitely end up in very different places, and I wanted you to see how that works. But I also want to make a mapping. And you'll recall, you can look at your notes, but if I want to translate 2 to the right, I would take my original x and y coordinates, and I would just move, I would add 2 to x, because that moves it 2 to the right, and I don't do anything to the y. And then, after I add 2 to the x, when I flip it over the y-axis, what I do is I take that x plus 2, and I reverse the sign of x plus 2, which means I need to use parentheses to keep that so that I'm adding the 2 before I flip the sign. And then, but look, I haven't done anything to the y. In both cases, in both transformations, this triangle is not moving, but first I add 2, and then after I add 2, I flip the sign. And so I can take this transformation and find each new point. So I need to do, and I'm going to actually write the first one out. First I take -4 and I put it in for x. And then, let's see here, y will be the same. So now I'm actually going to do the math. -4 plus 2 is -2. But then I need to flip the sign of -2 and it becomes +2. So my new x will be at +2, -1. It'll go from here to here, and that'll be x prime. Now I'm going to do the same with y, but now I'm not going to write it out this time. I'm going to take -2 and put it in. -2 plus 2 is 0. And so, but 0 is still just 0. And then, so it stays there, and then the y is 3, so 0, 3 here. The new y prime is 2 units to the right of where the old one was, whereas the x is 6 units to the right of where the old one was. Let's see where the new z is. Well, I would do -1 plus 2, that's 1, but then I would flip the sign and it would become -1. And then the y stays the same. Oh my gosh, the new z prime is where the old z was. Interesting. There it is. First, we moved it 2 units to the right. Then we flipped it over the y-axis. So z moved 2 units to the right and then jumped back to where it was. Now let's look at the same thing, only now we're going to do it in the other order. So now first, let's do it in red again, I guess. First, the first thing we do is reflect, which means we take the x and we make it negative. We flip the sign of the x, and then after that, we add 2. Notice the main difference here is that there are no parentheses on this second one, on this mapping. We're going to flip the sign before we add 2, whereas on this one we add 2 before we flip the sign. So now let's think about what happens here. First I'm going to take this x, this -4, and flip the sign and make it +4. Then I'm going to add 2 to that. So +4 plus 2, which is 6. So my new x is at 6, -1. Different place. My new y. First I'm going to flip this sign to make it +2 and then add 2. 2 plus 2 is 4, 3. So 4, 3 is where I find my new y. And then finally, z. First I flip the -1 to a +1. Then I add 2 to that, and I get 3, 1 for z. So 3, 1 here. And so I get a very different thing when I'm done. So now take these ideas and remember that when first you translate and then reflect, you need parentheses in your mapping. And if first you reflect and then you translate, you don't need parentheses. And do these as best you can in your notebook. Some of them are going to go off the -5 to +5 graph. Just do your best.